Ladies and gentlemen, I greet you with the universal greetings of peace, a greeting used by all of the prophets of God. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, which means may the peace and blessings of the one God be upon you all. There is nothing in Islam which really personifies what it is about than the greeting itself. The words Assalamu alaikum, the words of peace, whether it be to somebody that you know or somebody that you don't know. The words of peace. And this is the greeting used by Muslims, not just to the Muslims, fellow Muslims, but to everyone, because this in essence is what Islam is all about. We talk about the meaning of the word Islam. The word Islam means peace. It means peace through a process of submission and surrender to the one God. And I want to take you back today to the year 610. It's over 1400 years now. In the niche of a mountain, just on the outskirts of Makkah, in the Arabian Peninsula. And there an unlettered, middle-aged man sat in solitude, reflecting, his heart in turmoil. And you might wonder, what is he in turmoil about? Was he somebody who was in need of money? Was he somebody who was not respected? He was exactly that. He was somebody who was respected, somebody who had everything at his disposal, yet he was somebody who was there on that desert mount in a state of turmoil, spiritual turmoil. When he reflected upon his life, he was somebody who was born in warfare. The year of his birth is called the year of the elephant. It was a year in which the whole of Makkah and the surrounding was nearly destroyed because of warfare. He was born into a family where he was of a single parent. His father had died even before he was born. He lived with his mother and also with different others until the age of 6, when she herself passed away. So he was somebody who understood what it meant to be an orphan. And as he grew up, he lived as a shepherd. He worked as a businessman. And he was able to reflect upon the business activities of the Arabian Peninsula, especially around the Kaaba. A place where people used to come for the exchange of goods and services. But also a place where there was great economic exploitation, with those people who were poor become even poorer, and those who were rich, they took everything that they could from those who were rich. Where there was exchange of slaves, where there were people who were so deprived because of the fact that they did not have or did not come from a family that was well known. These were the conditions under which he lived. And even at that time, he felt the need for change. And he joined with others who felt likewise in an association called the Hilful Fudul in history, which was an organization which aimed to establish virtue, and to defend the rights of those who were dispossessed in Makkah at the time. He was married to somebody who was prosperous, who had wealth. He had many children with her, 4 children, 4 girls. But despite all of that, this was a man who in the year 610 was sitting in a state of turmoil, often regressing towards the desert mount, thinking about the situation. Is this what life is all about? Is this what, and he was doing as much as he could. And there the angel Gabriel came to him, as the angel Gabriel had come to those before him, to Moses, to Jesus, to Abraham, to David, and to so many others, and gave him the words. and the words which changed the whole of humanity, and the words which has changed our lives today, especially the lives of 1.8 billion of us in the world today. And the words were, Iqra, Bismi Rabbika alladhi khalaq. And these were powerful words. They were not words to come to a blind belief, but the words were the words of read, educate yourself, take yourself out of a state of ignorance. These were the words that the angel Gabriel brought with him. And these were the words that Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, took forth with him. And he tried to spread this message, this powerful message of being able to educate yourself. But read, not just read, but read with the purpose in mind. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of the one who is your sustainer, the one who created you. Why the one who created you? Because the one who created you helps you to understand who you are. That you are not just somebody who is self-sufficient. You are somebody who is subservient and should be subservient to the one God. That you are not living in this world not just for yourselves, for a short period, and that's the end of life. The life is much more than that. Life has meaning. Life has purpose. And the purpose of life is to be a custodian of the one who gave you life in the first place. The custodian of God. To be his representative upon the earth. To be able to spread his message. And his message that was given was a message of peace. And over a period of 23 years, the Prophet of God received these revelations from God, which is put together, which is known as the Quran. But who exactly was he? Before he became a prophet, he was among the noblest of people there. He was among the most respected of people. They gave him the honored title of Al-Amin As-Sadiq, the one who is trustworthy and the one who is truthful. But the moment that he started to spread this message, even though he was Al-Amin As-Sadiq, it was a message which was repelled by those around him. He was criticized. His name was dragged. He was beaten. And those around him who accepted his message, the handful of those around him, who were they? They were slaves. They were the destitute. They were the poor. They won't be able to recognize exactly what he was talking about. They were the young people. And they tried and decided to spread this message of Islam. And the message of Islam that is spread was a single message. In the words of Bilal, the Abyssinian slave, the message was simply Ahad, one God. One God. That even though I am a slave, you can enslave my body, but you cannot enslave my heart. My heart is subservient. My heart will surrender to the one God, to Allah, the one God. This was the message of Bilal, who was beaten in the desert sands for saying that. And this was a message that was repelled at that time. But despite the message being repelled, the Prophet did not respond in kind. His name was dragged. He was called all sorts of things. They tried to juggle the words of his name around, such that others can laugh and joke about it. And he himself, do you know what? He used to laugh and joke about it as well. He said, they talk about this man. Look, but my name is not him. My name is Mohammed. In order to be able to pacify his companions. There were many around him who loved him, who understood what the message was, who understood the sacrifices that he was undergoing. But they felt the need to do something. But he would hold them back. He would say, this is not the way. Islam is not about trying to conquer people by physical domination. Islam is about trying to conquer hearts and minds. And that's the message we talk about today. Trying to conquer hearts and minds. And this is why at the end of his life, there were over 125,000 people, or most of the Arabian Peninsula, who came together to be able to witness him give his last sermon before his departure from this world at the age of 63. So he was a man, the Quran describes him, and perhaps there are no better words that can describe the character and who exactly that he was than the words in the Quran itself. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And I have not sent, this is God speaking, and I have not sent you except as a mercy unto humanity. I notice the words which have been used in the Quran. These are not the words mercy to Muslims, mercy to those that you know, mercy to your family and friends, but a mercy to humanity. But Islam is not just about Islam for Muslims. Islam is for humanity. Islam is about trying to ensure that the rights of all are protected. Thus when the Prophet, upon whom be peace, went to Medina, and he was able to establish the first state of Islam, it was a state which was very much multicultural. It was not just a state of Muslims who could have dominated and do what they want at the expense of everyone else, but it was a state which had Christians, it had Jews, it had atheists, it had idolaters, it had all sorts of people. And most importantly, there the Prophet was. And the Muslims, in fact, were a minority in the beginning. They were not a majority. But he was able to bring all of these parties together, many of whom were fighting for centuries, not understanding exactly what were these battles about. Be able to bring those people together and to be able to make them live in peace and in harmony. Not just those who were living there, but also to be able to bring refugees. Bring the refugees, bring people who were being persecuted from other territories into Medina. And show people how refugees ought to be treated, how they should be given dignity, how they should be given that whatever it is that you have, that they also have a part of it. As human beings, we have a responsibility. And this is what he taught. The lesson of being able to look at others and say, you are my brother, or you are my sister. And exactly the same way I would treat my blood brother and sister is exactly the way I would treat you, because you are my brother and sister in humanity. This is who the Rasul of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Prophet of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, peace be upon him, was. So the Quran describes him as a mercy to humanity. A mercy to humanity. And these words, mercy to humanity, is something that we Muslims and non-Muslims and everyone who is present here ought to look at. When we look at the way that we as Muslims behave, when we look at the way others look at us and what they think about us, are we reflective of being rahmatul lil alameen, who are mercy unto humanity? Do others look at you and say, yes, this is somebody I wish they can become my neighbor. I wish they can become my friend. I wish he was my mother. I wish he was my father. I wish he was my son. This is what we want to be. We want people to be able, when they look at us, when we are with them or when we are not with them, they can say, there goes somebody. He's a good person. He's the person I am happy that he is my friend, that he is my colleague, that he is somebody who is associated with me. So, as I leave today, I have 3 simple requests for you. Just 3. The first one is that one of the first revelation, as I mentioned, talked about read, Iqra, read. And it is sad that one of the biggest disappointments among Muslims and amongst the entire worldwide society is that they know so little about who the Prophet of God was, Muhammad, upon whom be peace. We read about him in little pamphlets, but rarely we read about him in the media, but we have not been able to study his life. We have not been able to study his words. We have not been able to dwell in exactly what is he about, or what exactly was his mission, or what exactly did he mean and the Quran meant when it said that he was a mercy to humanity. So this is my first request, that as you leave here today, take it upon yourself as an obligation, as a task, as a challenge to be able to go and read something more about who the Prophet was. And beyond that, I want you to be able, especially you Muslims, to be able to emulate his character. The Quran talks about his character as being something called uswatun hasana, the most best example. The most best example, the best of examples. And this is where I want you to be able, when it is that people look at you, you should be able to tell them, here goes Muhammad. My parents called me Muhammad, and now I understood why. But it's a responsibility, it's a challenge, it's something to work towards. And that responsibility is to become somebody who can say that when people ask you about Muhammad, when people ask you about Islam, when people ask you about the Quran, you can say, you don't need to read a book, just look at me. This is the way I behave. This is what I stand for. This is what the Quran is. Unfortunately, we are far away from that character who lived there in the 6th century. And the last thing is that we have an obligation. And that obligation is not to keep that message that was given to ourselves. That message that was given, the message of La ilaha illallah, that there is nothing which is worthy of worship except God. And that Muhammad is simply a messenger of God. He's a human being, but he was somebody who was appointed by God, given that task, that responsibility of being able to communicate his message. To be able to become somebody who would be able to spread that message. Whether you're Muslim sitting here today or non-Muslim, I want you to be able to take these words to your friends, to your colleagues. And it's only by being able to show and to be able to demonstrate who the real character of the Prophet was, what Islam exactly is about, not by some who are on the fringes and some extremists, but exactly what Islam is about for the words themselves. Most people, when they talk about things, they talk about things from hearsay, rather than having been able to dwell and study it in the manner in which it ought to be done. So this is my message I leave with you today. So there are 3 things I want you to do. The first of which is learn more, read more, educate yourself more about the Prophet. The secondly, become the Prophet. Be proud of saying that I am Muhammad, and demonstrate by virtue of the character that you are somebody who is a mercy unto humanity. And lastly, share this message of Islam to those around you. Thank you very much.